Hello and welcome to All for United. Make sure you smash that like button and hit subscribe. We've got a bit of a transfer special for you now as the rumour mill is going full throttle. Apparently United are closing in on their first January signing. Moises Caicedo. He's a young Ecuadorian with a lot of promise, a lot of potential and a relatively small price tag. But you don't really want to hear that nitty gritty. You can hear that from anyone on Twitter. What you want to hear about is more about the young lad. So I am joined today by Adam Brandon, who is a South American football expert. Adam, thank you for jumping on, mate. And you was telling me a really nice story of how actually you was introduced to Moises Caicedo.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Ben. Always a pleasure to talk about Moises Caicedo. He first caught my eye when I was watching the first game of Independiente del Valle's season. They're a club that I really admire here in South America, so I quite often catch a lot of their games. And yeah, the first game of the season, which was back in January, February time, he picked up the ball from sort of a defensive midfield position, played a couple of passes, drove through the midfield, played sort of a second assist, if you will, and the ball was blasted home. But the whole move for me was all down to the work of Moises Caicedo. So I was like, who is this kid? And yeah, I sort of delved a little bit more, saw that there was quite a buzz in Ecuador about him, from sort of the journalists who had been following him at youth level as well. So it's like, right, okay, well, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Watched him over sort of the next couple of games as well. He stood out then as well. And yeah, I basically tipped him to shine in the Copa Libertadores. It's like South America's premium club competition here, equivalent to Europe's Champions League, and yeah, he did that. So yeah, I wrote a couple of pieces on him during lockdown as well, about just how big of a potential I think Moises Caicedo has. He definitely has the potential to become Ecuador's greatest ever player, I would say.
Wow, that is a glowing reference. Ecuador's greatest ever player, of course, because we know an Ecuadorian quite well in Antonio Valencia, and over the weeks we've learned how much of an idol Valencia is to Moises, to Caicedo, and how much he loves his country, how much he loves his football as well. We're hearing a lot about the young lad, but I think really the best place to start off the back of your story is, who is Moises Caicedo? Who is he? How old is he? Where's he come from? What's his background like? And for you, how has he developed over the past year?
Yeah, so he turned 19 this year. He was discovered at 13 in Ecuador's fourth biggest city, which is called Santo Domingo. And he was discovered there by the club I've already mentioned, the one he's currently at, Independiente del Valle. They, for me, are the best run club in well, certainly in Ecuador, arguably in South America as well. And basically from the moment they discovered him, it seems like they thought that he had immense promise and talent. And basically he's already proved to be a pretty effective, at South American level anyway, defensive midfielder. And when I first wrote about him in the start of the year, that's where he really had proved himself, not just at senior level, but also at under 20 level for Independiente del Valle. And the under 20 level he reached here in South America with his club side was quite a high one, because basically Independiente del Valle made the Copa Libertadores under 20s. And around the start of the year, there was a period where he was so important to both the senior side and the youth side. He was playing for both teams. So there was like 1 week where basically he was he was playing for the under 20 side in the Libertadores in Paraguay. He then flew back to Ecuador after he'd won them the semi-final. Got back to Ecuador. Was man of the match in a really high profile game against Liga de Quito in the Ecuadorian league, and then flew back again for the final of the under 20 Libertadores. Played in that, won that, and was man of the match in that as well, I think. Then flew back again and came on as a substitute and scored his first goal in the Libertadores, in the senior Libertadores a few days later. So
Crazy. That's
I know,
ridiculous. You don't hear of that.
but
Like you hear players
no,
playing at youth level once they break into the senior team if maybe they've had an injury or something, but you don't hear them juggling both the
yeah,
youth team and the senior team being such an important player for both. I think it just goes
no,
to show his stature and how far he has come in such a short space of time. There's quite a lot
yeah,
of people watching on Facebook and Twitter. Guys, if you're over there, come over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/All for United. Hit like and get in the live chat. If you've got a question on Caicedo, on our potential new January signing, please get it in the live chat and I'll ask it to Adam towards the end of the show. Joe already has jumped in saying, sounds incredibly promising. Let's get him and develop him as the next star. Greb, we're going to come on to this. Can he walk into playing in the 11 directly? Noel's asking, how much time will he take to adjust to the Premier League? We will ask that in a moment. But what I think he looks like he's got, Adam, when it comes to his qualities, and I'd love you to hit on some of those, is he looks like he's got a presence. He looks like he's got strength. He looks like he is built ready, whereas sometimes when you sign young lads, we've seen it in Palistri, we've seen it in Diallo, that maybe they aren't yet ready in terms of having that inner toughness for the Premier League, whereas Caicedo looks like he has that already. What would you say are his main qualities?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, I've already said like he first broke through sort of defensive midfield role in recent months for both his club and the Ecuadorian national team, and his performances for the Ecuador national team are the ones I think people really should get excited about, because that's obviously the highest level he's played to date, and he's dominated midfield for Ecuador in games against Colombia and Uruguay, which is no easy feat. I think we could now class him as sort of a box-to-box midfielder. I initially saw him as sort of a 6. He's certainly more of an 8 now. He's developed that quickly into sort of an all-round midfielder. Strengths, I would say, I'd say his biggest one is probably his range of passing. He's got great vision with that. He's also very good at reading the game. Great tactical awareness and anticipation of situations. And it was that anticipation and tactical awareness, and also he's also got pretty good tackling ability as well. Like when he first came through, a lot of people were comparing him to N'Golo Kante, and I think that was a fair comparison, but I think he's possibly moved on from that a bit more now, and we'll come on to some other comparisons later. But yeah, I think I think this is a player who you could class. He could play pretty much anywhere through the middle of a side. So when I first wrote about him at the start of the year, I actually said this is a player who could not only play defensive midfield, but could also sort of play a centre back or sweeper role as well, because in certain style of sides. But again, I think it's moved on from that now, and you would have to play him further up the pitch from what he's proved with the Ecuador national team. So I'd certainly play him sort of more as an 8 in that kind of role.
And in terms of who you've seen him play next to and how you've seen him play in a midfield, is he usually in a midfield 2? Would you say they're more holding? Would you say they're further forward? Has he been used to playing a midfield 3?
Yeah, so he's played in quite a few roles already. So for basically the Independiente del Valle, he's played often in a 4-2-3-1 as
Similar to the United formation, then.
Yeah, and that. But in that, he quite often played as one of the defensive midfielders in that formation. But he's also been seen in more advanced positions as well in there. And for Ecuador, he's played a more advanced position in say a 4-3-3. So yeah, I think one of his great strengths really is his, like I say, his sort of tactical awareness, his tactical intelligence, means that he can play. He can play in quite a few different roles for the side. Yeah, I've seen him in games where he's played centre back, defensive midfield, and centre midfield.
It's so rare, isn't it, to have
Yeah.
that intelligence and knowledge at such a young age. And usually, you know, players who are young, and I don't mean this as a disrespect to any leagues around the world, but usually the young players who have that are coming up through maybe the more tactical, astute leagues and the bigger leagues, because they're learning from, you know, vastly experienced players around them. Where it sounds like Caicedo has sort of he's learned himself. He has a fantastic footballing brain. He's in and around a side which has youth and experience, and he's juggling the levels. He's been able to pick up not just how to intelligently navigate through a game, but also how to still have that rawness about him, so that he can create moments of magic.
Yeah. So for Ecuador, he was playing in a 4-4-2, and as one of the two centre midfielders, he was actually the one who was getting in more advanced positions, and that is something that we saw to great effect in the World Cup qualifiers already, where Ecuador have had a fantastic start. They've won 3 of their first 4 games, and their one defeat was on Caicedo's international debut, which was against Argentina, and where he was partly responsible for giving away a penalty, which wasn't an ideal start to his international career. But that game, Ecuador, it was the first game under their manager, their new manager Gustavo Alfaro, and they were very tentative in that match. It wasn't really the kind of game where Caicedo shines. But a few days later, he made his home international debut, behind closed doors, obviously, unfortunately. But yeah, he completely dominated a game against Uruguay, scored within the first few minutes. I think he set up 1 or 2 goals as well after that. And and then the next international break, which was the November one. I think this was possibly one of his most interesting games so far, because Ecuador were at Bolivia away. They were 1-0 down at half time, and I was actually a bit critical of Caicedo at half time in that one. I thought that he could have had more influence over the game, and then within 2 minutes of the second half restarting, he played an absolutely beautiful ball onto his namesake Moises Caicedo, and yeah, Ecuador had equalised, and then they were soon ahead, and they ended up winning the game 3-2 with Caicedo setting up a couple. So yeah, he was still at 18 at that point, I think, or it's certainly had just turned 19, and it was amazing to see a player who was basically already his side's most key player at international level. I think that's a very rare thing indeed, and which is why so many of us here in South America are getting excited about him, because he's already shown that he can handle quite a lot of situations that I don't think a lot of young players can handle.
Yeah, and that's extremely positive to hear as a Manchester United fan, because that's who we need. We need players who, doesn't matter their age, can pick up games by the scruff of their neck, but also have such a high ceiling still as well, and that's where he sounds like he can still go different places, and there's so much excitement around him. We're getting so many comments in, Adam, loads of people watching. Guys, if you're not watching through YouTube, come to youtube.com/allforunited. This is what we like to do here. We're not saying that he's signed yet. When you're watching this, he might have done already, but we're trying to get you a proper insight into Caicedo and who he is as a player from Adam, who's obviously works within South American football. He's a writer, and he knows his stuff, and he's watched Caicedo quite a lot since the start of the year as well, when he really burst onto the scene. Adam, we're getting a few comments in here, which leads me on nicely to my next question. When you was describing him, many people in the comments saying, looks like he has a bit of Pogba and Fred about him. Sounds like, he's got a bit of Paul Pogba about him when you say the passing range.
The passing range, yeah, Pogba. I would
So who
say.
would you describe him to if you had to pick out a couple of players that you would sort of say, maybe it doesn't have to be to, because I know it's really difficult comparing footballers. I think every footballer has their own unique touch. But in terms of players similar to Caicedo, who maybe have excited you in the past and given you the same feeling watching him, maybe you can compare some attributes. You've mentioned Kante already. You've mentioned Pogba. But is there anyone else you want to throw out there?
Yeah, this one might not be as popular with Manchester United fans, but Steven Gerrard, maybe.
Wow.
So yeah, that certainly in Ecuador, I've seen that comparison get made quite a lot actually. Like they see him as as potentially Ecuador Steven Gerrard. So um, and I can see some similarities there. Certainly, I remember when Gerrard came through, he was first sort of played in more defensive roles, wasn't he? Um, and then was sort of moved into a more sort of advanced roles, and then just became sort of a box to box midfielder, complete all rounder, really. So yeah, I think that's a possible comparison there. Obviously, these are quite, we are talking about a 19-year-old
Yeah.
Ecuadorian here, and as much as I love him, and as much as I've been big on him from the start, I think it would be unfair to put like such huge pressure on him by comparing him to such legends of the game at this point. But yeah, you could say that he's a hybrid of a few players, really, which makes him unique to himself.
Yeah.
Maybe sort of the passing range of Pogba, but the off the ball and the kind of energy that maybe Kante gives you. So maybe sort of a mix of those two, you could say as well.
I love it because I think when we look at new players who maybe we don't know much about, we create this footballing Frankenstein. So it's
Yeah,
a bit that we can go passing range of Pogba, the grit and determination of Steven Gerrard, the right foot of Scholes,
yeah,
the energy of Kante. Like it's fantastic to build this picture. But he's still a young lad, isn't he, Adam? So he's going to have points which he needs to improve on. Is there anything, if he does move to the Premier League, or when he does move to the Premier League, potentially with Manchester United, that potentially worries you slightly about his development?
yeah. So I would say that the improvement points. There have been occasions where I've seen him where his first touch has let him down at times, and I thought, well, maybe in Europe that would be exposed a little bit more than it is here at South American level. And I think one of the biggest differences between South American football and European football these days, especially a Premier League, is the intensity of the games, and that it's not necessarily the intensity in a one-off match. I think it's the intensity over sort of a number of games over the course of the season. And I think that's sort of the biggest question when you've got young players stepping up to Premier League level is can they handle that week in, week out level of consistency needed to perform at that level. Like, I'm a Norwich fan, and we had quite a lot of young players in our side last season, all very talented. But one of the things that I thought they struggled with was the intensity of the Premier League, the physicality of the Premier League. South American football is pretty physical at times. Ecuadorian football can be as well, but but Premier League is kind of a different level when it comes to that, and I think it can be difficult to judge until you've actually thrown a player in that situation as to exactly how they'll react to it. So yeah, that's definitely a situation to watch for. And the only sort of slight, I'm not sure of the right word really. I'm not sure worry is the right word, but it's certainly something to sort of be aware of. That senior level, so for Independiente del Valle and Ecuador, all of his best performances have come at altitude. So but I can't really remember so far a massive standout performance at sea level, which is but in Ecuador, so many of the games are at altitude, and the national team play at altitude. So it's basically very difficult to judge. But yeah, generally his best performances, his man of the match performances, have come. And it's not like he's the one with the advantage. You know, these are all against players who are used to playing at altitude as well, mostly anyway. The exception would be when Independiente del Valle won 5-0 against Flamengo, and that was sort of one of his standout performances of the year. And the Brazilian side said, oh, they just couldn't cope with the altitude on the night. And then, to be fair, the second game back in Rio, in Brazil, Flamengo won 4 or 5-0 as well. So, you know, it was basically roles reversed. So, yeah, you do get these extremes in South American football between sort of home and away performances. But
playing with high altitude, though, surely that means it's got an engine on him, and that obviously surely gets the best of it. So if it's really, I mean, I haven't seen him play. I've got to be completely honest, and I am one of those people. I mean, I don't know about the guys watching. I think you can all pitch in on this if you want, but I hate watching compilation videos because I think you can obviously make anyone look good in a compilation video. Yeah. But I think what you can see is just that ability, and I think everything you're saying here, everything we've seen, everything we've heard from people around, you know, the South American press. They like him. They really rate him. And he really is, isn't he, Adam? I want to hit on this quickly. Received positively in not just Ecuador, but the whole of South America. They see him now as one of their standout talents for the future, don't they? And when they highly rate someone, they stick behind them. So for you out there, how have you seen Caicedo's potential move to United being received? And how do people out there rate him?
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where he's gone from basically being a complete unknown for the majority of the South American footballing public at the start of the year to now being sort of the player that a lot of people were talking about and would love to have on their team. You know, I've seen him linked with Boca Juniors, for example, who maybe say 15, 20 years ago, yeah, this would be the move for him when South American football was still more, you know, close to European football. But, you know, European football and South American football have become so far apart now, quality-wise, that, you know, to see him get linked there, you're thinking it's not really that much of a step up. You know, he needs to go to somewhere in Europe, and that was sort of a view shared by a lot of people here. I think a lot of people expected maybe him to go to the Portuguese league or the Dutch league first, and then maybe move on to a bigger league. That was certainly sort of the viewpoint for a lot of the year. But I think after the national team performances for Ecuador, he then sort of moved up into another level, really, where, you know, he was then getting linked with the biggest clubs in Europe. There was a strong rumor with Milan for a few weeks, and yeah, in recent weeks, obviously, it's been a strong link with Manchester United, a club that he says that he supports because Antonio Valencia played there, of course, and Valencia is one of his idols. So. Yeah, I think. I think basically Caicedo is a player that is expected now to play for one of the top clubs or in one of the top leagues in Europe, and obviously this transfer to Manchester United is moving ever closer, according to the press here in South America.
I was going to say the rumoured fee is €6 million. What do you know about that, and how much of a bargain is that?
Yeah, so this is like the really kind of annoying element for me to transfer, because Independiente del Valle are a wonderful club, one of the best run clubs in South America, as I mentioned earlier. But they've never had a player of this class, of this amount of talent before. And I think they're maybe a little bit sort of inexperienced in saying, in putting a bit of a price tag on him, and because if he was at a Brazilian club, say, you're talking about a player here who's probably not going for any less than 30 million pounds. Certainly, if I look at some of the fees paid for Brazilian players in recent years, I think that's a fair comment. And if he was in Argentina, you're talking probably similar, or maybe 20-25 million up. So I think the reason why you're getting him so cheap is basically because of his nationality, and there is a huge bias in transfer fees here, where Brazilian and Argentinian players will always go for maybe 10 times more than an Ecuadorian player or a Colombian player of similar ability. So yeah, I think it's
bargain.
Well, you have 6 million. You can't go wrong, because the amount of potential he has, if it did somehow completely fail, I think you would still find a buyer for a similar amount, given his reputation in the game. But that's unlikely to happen, because if Manchester United buy him, they're going to have to make a decision on him. I would say that it's been a bit of a debate between the guys that I do the South American football show with, which is my podcast for those interested. You can find that at World Football Index, where you can also find a couple of articles I've written about Caicedo. And we were sort of debating this, where a couple of people think that maybe he's going to be ready to jump straight in to Manchester United first team. But it's a bit like what I was saying earlier. I think it's so difficult to tell these days, because South American football and European football are poles apart, really, in the modern game.
Just on that, actually, Adam. So you mentioned there about the game being quite far apart and a lot of difference. Guys, get in the live chat, by the way. If you're not watching on YouTube, youtube.com/allforunited. If you love this video, please hit that like button. Let's get it to well over 20 likes. I think Adam's been absolutely fantastic on this, giving us such an amazing insight. So please hit that like button, share it about, so people can learn about Caicedo from someone who you can trust, who knows him, who's seen him play. And additionally, subscribe for the channel, because we'd be doing a lot more of this content around players who we're potentially linked with over the coming transfer windows, let's say. It's not just about January. But Liam Clark here, hitting on culture. Most South American players take a while to settle in England. We've seen Pellistri come in and go straight into the under-21s, and he is now finding comfort and starting to find some really good form in the under-21s. Looks like we've managed him perfectly. How much of a culture shock do you think it would be for 19-year-old Caicedo, the Ecuadorian, coming over to England?
I'd say that the good news is a bit like what I was saying earlier. So far in his career, he's taken everything in his stride. Nothing seems to have fazed him. On the other hand, moving to a completely different country, and I know this from personal experience, and having to learn a new language, whatever age you are, I did it at 26, 27. He's only 19, and I quite often think, would I have been able to cope with all the changes at 19? And so it's definitely one where, until you throw a player in that situation, you're just completely guessing as to whether they will sink or swim. If I was to put money on it, I would say that from everything that I read about him, hear about him, and see for myself, I would say that he's going to swim. He's going to do fine. But that might not say that he needs a bit of help, certainly in his first year, to adapt to English life, English football, and obviously he's going to need to learn the language. So, yeah, I think it'd be an interesting one to see how it develops, and it is going to be a pretty big culture shock for him,
of course.
No doubt.
As you say, as it would be for anyone. I moved to Dubai when I was 19, and it was crazy. So he's, football as a human as well. Guys, keep liking the video, keep getting your live chats in. We're going to do a few more. You mentioned this earlier on, Adam, but your thoughts? Do you think they'll go straight into the first team squad, or do you think that he needs to develop under the 23s first?
Yeah, I would be surprised if he went straight into the first team, just because of not necessarily because he lacks the ability. It's more just the adaptation process. I think it would be probably more sensible to manage him in a way where he goes into the under 23s. Maybe give him a cup game if Manchester United aren't taking the FA Cup, for example, too seriously this season, or something. You could maybe test him out there. Same with the Uruguayan winger. You've got Palestri. See how they get on in that situation. But yeah, I think the sensible thing would be is for the Manchester United coaches to have a look at him in sort of these next few months and have an eye on what's best for his development next season. Mm-hmm. Because if he isn't going to get regular first team football, then I think the most sensible thing for Manchester United to do is loan him out for a season. Maybe to a newly promoted club in the Premier League. Let's say if that's Norwich, then I'll certainly take it.
You're hoping now, aren't you? You're begging Woodward. If you're watching, I think Adam's hoping that a loan move to Norwich might be on the cards. But quickly, Adam, I don't want to put you on the spot. But do you know any of... Noel makes a good point here. I've seen some things flying around about work permits and stuff, which obviously with Brexit from the 1st of January, by the looks of things, going to be an absolute nightmare. Do you know... I don't want to put you on the spot, so feel free to say no. Do you know anything about the situation around work permit?
Yeah, he'll be fine.
And he'll be fine, so he should be able to join in January then.
This is sort of an advantage, really, for South American players. A lot of certainly the ones who play for their national team and the ones who play Libertadores. If you're playing those, if you're basically playing World Cup qualifiers for your national team and you're playing Libertadores, you're pretty much set for a work permit. So yeah, and Ecuador also in sort of the top 50, I think, in the FIFA rankings. So yeah, he'd be fine for that.
Perfect. So yeah, because that was one of the things that was flying around. I have one more question for you. I don't think there's any more questions on here, but I have one more question for you, Adam. There's a lot of rumours around United in terms of potentially Paul Pogba leaving this summer. There's rumours around our midfield. We just haven't got a strong enough or balanced enough midfield. So for you, Caicedo coming in, does he improve that balance within Manchester United's midfield options? And is he a star for the future in your eyes?
Yeah, well, definitely to both. Whether that impact will be instant or not is something we definitely have to wait and see. But potentially, yeah, he's a player who could transform your midfield without a doubt. And he for me, he's one of the best investments you can make in world football at this point in time.
Wow, it's exciting. I can't wait to watch him play. Guys, if you've just joined halfway through, go back to the start. Adam has helped us ask the question, who is Moises Caicedo? And he sounds like a very promising young lad indeed. Look, at this moment, when we've done this video, the deal isn't done. Let's hope it is. It's a rumoured €6 million fee, which Adam said is an absolute bargain. Of course, if it's any other football club in world football, it's a probably 30, 40 million euro deal. So this is one that we hope United will get over the line. Adam, just one more time, can you quickly shout out your podcast for us, please?
Yeah, so basically I'm from the World Football Index, a site called World Football Index, and we have a podcast on there called the South American Football Show, which I sometimes host, sometimes I'm a guest on. And yeah, and basically pretty much every couple of weeks we will go over sort of the big stories in South American football, usually covering the Libertadores. So yeah, check that out if you're interested to find out more about South American football. And also on World Football Index, we do have something called the Scouting Spotlight podcast. And if you search for Scouting Spotlight and Moises Caicedo, you can hear more from me, but also from a couple of my colleagues at World Football Index and what they make of Moises. So yeah, he's got his own episode on there as well. And I've got an article on him as well up on the site. But to be honest, I wrote that back in lockdown, and that was after only 5 or 6 professional appearances. And now he's up to, well, he must be up to about 25 by now, I imagine. And he already looks a different player to what I wrote about at the start of the year. So yeah.
To be honest, I think you've described him really well in this video as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Adam, thank you so much. It's been amazing to hear from someone who's actually watched Caicedo play live, and to hear your experiences watching him over the past year develop into the footballer that he is, and that hopefully Manchester United are going to get. Adam, Brandon, thank you very much. We're all for United. Hit that subscribe button, smash a like on this video as well. Let's get them up and up, because Adam's contribution has been amazing. And coming up a little bit later on, we've got so much more on the channel, so make sure you go check it out. Ciao for now.